The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Welcome in, friends. It's time for another Need to Know. Kip Keefer on this start of another week, and we are going to just do a little bit of conversing today. I think the more I listen to this developing phenomenon that is the podcast, my son, who's 30 years old, is an adamant podcast listener. Had some good conversations with him in the last couple of days about what's most appealing. And he basically, it's kind of funny how generations kind of collide, because after a lot of discussion, his answer basically was, well, I really enjoy shows that really don't have a theme, that are basically about nothing in particular, which harkens back to one of the great shows, of course, of my era, Seinfeld, which was the classic show about nothing. But it always was about something that was pertinent to life experience. And just about every Seinfeld covered some kind of subject that all of us encounter, whether it's awkwardness socially or not knowing what to say to people, or trying to lay low and not offend people, or just getting into situations in different circumstances. The show was brilliant. Larry David and Seinfeld wrote most of the episodes, or all of the episodes, and conceptualized a show that everyone could identify with. And I think podcasting, as I kind of evolve into the art, is something that is best when it is not terribly structured. It's a better conversational situation. So I hope that you can embrace the concept here of me conversing with you. I would like to have some back and forth with you, but at this stage, this show is to convey in conversational style things that I think would be enhancing for you that maybe you have not thought of, because certainly most of the things I talk about are not presented in conventional media, which is a good way to kind of kick this off. And I've got some examples of what I want to talk about today, but conventional media now it has made a complete turn to what it used to be and what it used to be based on. It was more of a journalistic pursuit to give you the perspective of both sides of an issue, and really kind of just arm you with facts, and not conclusions, not dramatic dissertations on how you should think about things, which is what modern media has devolved into, I guess is the best way to put it. I don't need a 20-some-odd-year-old reporter at the scene of a major story telling me how to conclude. I need the facts. I need exactly what happened. I need them to be a reporter, not a commentator. And that's the biggest difference of what we see right now in our media circles, that people want to tell you what to think. And I think of the classic example. There was a reporter, I just happened to have it on a Saturday. I had watched some kind of sporting event. I think it was on NBC or CBS, one of the major networks. And the weekend news came on, which is always kind of a joke in network television, because you get somebody in the anchor chair that is just an aspirant, wannabe, nobody that's a serious person on the network wants to work the Saturday night gig. There's a great movie that I just absolutely love called Broadcast News. It starred William Hurt and Albert Brooks and Holly Hunter, and it was just if you're a media guy, it was just a classic movie. But there's of course a famous scene in there where Albert Brooks, who's just an extraordinarily brilliant reporter and writer. He's thinking that his career could go to the next level if he could anchor some, and basically sit in the studio. So on the night of a big soiree in Washington, where all of the people in the network are going to be tied up by going to this award show, Albert Brooks' character volunteers to be to do the Saturday night anchoring for the news, and they get it done for him. And it turns out to be just this disastrous experience, because he develops this terrible flop sweat and is nervous despite writing all this great copy and having the most eloquent newscast ever. But he barely gets through it because, at every break, as soon as they go to a commercial or maybe a tape piece of a reporter somewhere, people are running around with hair dryers and towels trying to towel him down, because he's just has this nervous sweating thing going on. People were, he told Holly Hunter's character afterwards that people were calling the station and wondering if he was breaking out with some kind of terrible disease, and they were worried for him. But it really was a great example, of in that era. And he went on to say, I've come to realize that I don't want to sit there and read news. I want to go out and report on news. But now we don't have that. Now we have people in studios and people at scenes that basically want to tell you what they think and tell you what they're told to tell you to think. And it's really sad. And some of the great journalists of our past would be appalled now to see how it goes. So with that being said, what I thought you really needed to know this week was this basic fact, that you can't take for granted, or you can't take on its face anything that any of these media people say now. And I'm not talking about just the left-wing media, the MSNBC, the CNNs. They are really bad. But, Fox News, which a lot of the people on the left will tell you is fitting the description of what I'm talking about. Fox News has gotten big enough and has gotten to the point where, they are commanding the principal amount of viewers. They are number one in across the board in cable news by far, but they have a lot of people now, and they continue to basically kind of get the real ideological people off their air, and they're trying to add more and more people to kind of give it a little bit of balance. They've always promoted themselves as fair and balanced, but they've got a lot of personalities that are, I'm just going to say it, lazy. One of the principal things, and when I heard a commentator on Fox News say this recently, it kind of shocked me, because when this report came out, and I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the special prosecutor's report appointed by Merrick Garland, the sitting attorney general. Merrick Garland came in with a chip on his shoulder to start with, because many of you may not be aware or have forgotten that when Justice Scalia passed away late in the Trump administration, in 2019, and it was a sudden, unexpected demise for one of the great legal minds in our country. But Anton Scalia passed away at a hunting lodge, and of course that's a lifetime term, so that opened a seat on the Supreme Court. And this was actually at the end of, and I misspoke there. This was actually the end of the Obama administration, right before Trump became president in 2016. So Scalia would have passed away in the spring or summer of 2015. Well, that left Barack Obama in the last days of his presidency in a position to appoint a new Supreme Court justice, and he tabbed Merrick Garland, who was a lifetime D.C. lifer, kind of typical. He had been appointed as a federal appeals judge, and now he was slated for the Supreme Court. But this was an election year. This was in about May or June of that year in 2015, and in 2016, I'm misspeaking again. I got to get my dates right here. This is one of the problems with doing a show like I do it without any notes. But this was in 2016. When Scalia died, the election, of course, in November of that same year. So Obama selects Merrick Garland to be the nominee for the open Supreme Court seat. But at that time, the Congress and primarily, I should say, the Senate was controlled by Republicans and the illustrious Mitch McConnell. And it was the maneuver, and it was the same maneuver that we've seen throughout history, where they just sat on the Garland nomination because nothing happens in a Supreme Court opening until the Senate has the hearing and approves or disapproves of the nominee. Well, instead of doing that, McConnell just sat on it, and Merrick Garland's appointment never was considered by the Senate because, of course, in the election in November, Trump shocked the world and beat Hillary Clinton, and Trump was now the president, and Garland's nomination was never acted upon. So Trump came in and nominated Neil Gorsuch, who became the successor to Scalia, and Merrick Garland was the odd man out who never got his day before the Senate to be approved or disapproved. So Garland then, of course, gets appointed by Joe Biden as the DOJ director, the attorney general, and so he doesn't come in with no grievances. He comes in being spurned by the previous administration, and you saw a lot of shenanigans here in the Biden administration under this Department of Justice, which was a continuation of what we even saw in the Trump administration. The thing that made the Trump administration so unusual was that, yes, there were a bunch of warriors on the legal side, the justice side, the Department of Justice during the Trump administration, like there are now in Biden's term. But the difference was they were not attacking the enemies or the philosophical or ideological opponents of that administration. They were all geared, even in his own administration, of attacking the president himself. It was an atmosphere of get Trump, because Trump was an outsider, and these are all, and this is the key point, folks. I've been telling you for months here that this inner circle, this secret society of people that think they're smarter and more qualified than you and I to make decisions for the country. These are people that are unelected. These are bureaucrats that get appointed to all of these big jobs and these influential departments, write about 90% of the policies that we all get stuck with, lead to our country spending just ridiculous amounts of money that we don't have to promote whatever agenda that they have. And what it yields is this bureaucracy, this kind of inner circle controlling group that makes Washington expand and become more and more powerful. And one of the things that they really do masterfully is to disguise this, because, as I've been trying to tell you, this is not political. This is not Republican, Democrat. This is U.S. citizen, a constitution, a country that's a representative republic, against a group that thinks all of that is nonsense because you're not qualified to make your own decisions. You're not smart enough. You don't have an Ivy League or Stanford law degree. So all of these elites in these inner sanctums of Washington, who we don't vote for, we don't select, these are the people that are largely running this government. And presidents come and go, senators come and go, but this ever-present group of superior beings that believe that a giant central massive government, basically a Marxist kind of view, because individual liberty and freedom and equal opportunity, that's not the agenda. The agenda is for these people to be in position to call the shots. And we had a classic example this time with this special prosecutor's report about Joe Biden and his handling of classified documents, and correlating that with Donald Trump, who is also in that same jackpot in terms of government investigations. But there's a huge difference in both the charges and the solutions to those charges, the resolutions of what's happened with special prosecutors. Of course, Jack Smith, that's not a very generic name. Jack Smith is the prosecutor on the Trump case, and after his investigation, he leveled 41 federal felony charges against Trump for his handling of classified documents. In the meantime, Robert Hur, in Washington, known as Rob Hur, it's H-U-R, he was appointed by Merrick Garland to investigate the classified documents that Joe Biden had in his possession, the sitting president. And the differences in those reports is stark, and the results of what happened in terms of how they're going to handle those cases going forward is astounding. But one thing that I really want to drive home today to you is that when Robert Hur's report came out on the Joe Biden and the documents that he had, Robert Hur, in about a 300-page opinion, expressed over and over that Joe Biden willfully possessed documents that he did not have authorization to have, and the fact that that these were not secured. They were spread in 3 different places. A lot of the more sensitive ones were actually sitting in his garage. I know all of you probably put stuff out in your garage that you really don't, have a lot of day-to-day use for, but it's always out there if you need it. They also found a lot of documents in his house and in his home office and in his desk drawers. And at the same time, Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, his home in Miami, there was no raid of Joe Biden's properties, no raid of his office at the University of Pennsylvania, which, by the way, the primary donor that made the Joe Biden Policy Center at the University of Pennsylvania possible was a multi-million, I think $30 or $40 million contribution by the Chinese government, which is what created the Joe Biden Research Center. Those terms are laughable anyway at this stage of his life. And even when he was in his prime, Joe Biden is not a guy that I would look to research anything, not an intellectual giant. Robert Gates, as I've mentioned many times here, a veteran in the swamp in all kinds of intelligence and different agencies, and worked in multiple administrations for both Republicans and Democrats, wrote in his book that in 40 years in Washington, Joe Biden has not been right a single time on any foreign policy issue. So you've got her, who issues his report that, yes, there was willful and intentional mishandling of documents here. These are serious allegations against Joe Biden. But his finding was, I'm not going to recommend criminal prosecution. It's not his decision. That's just a recommendation to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who is certainly not going to recommend any further action because he is heading up the Department of Justice for this administration and this president. But the reason given has created a huge firestorm. And that reason is that Joe Biden is at a stage where his memory is failing. He doesn't have the cognitive ability to stand trial as a defendant in a situation where he doesn't even remember the basic facts in his life, like when he was vice president or the year that his son passed away. That was some of the things cited in the report. Those aren't my words. That's what the special counsel wrote about Joe Biden. And it would be a situation where a jury would be very sympathetic to his situation and his declining faculties and his advanced age. So this guy recommends no criminal prosecution despite indefensible breaking of the law. And on the other hand, you've got Donald Trump, who is accused of having documents and being resistant to giving those back to the Department of Archives, who was claiming that they should be the rightful owners of those documents. And Trump doesn't get, he's 3 years younger than Joe Biden. Joe Biden gets he doesn't have the mental capacity or the memory to stand trial. Donald Trump gets 41 felony counts for his handling of documents. But here's the thing that no news media person is telling you. Here's the absolute most illuminant fact in all of this. Donald Trump, as the former president of the United States, has every right under our Constitution and our system to have classified documents because he was the president of the United States. Joe Biden, who had documents dating back all the way into the 1990s when he was a U.S. senator and he had served as vice president, Joe Biden has no clearance. It is illegal for him to have any documents that are classified or marked as top secret. The status of senator and vice president does not allow those documents to be in his possession. So basically, and here's the really bad part, when he was the senator from Delaware, and he's got a lot of documents from that era that they have recovered now, not in a raid, in a cooperative, hey, come on in, there's some boxes out in the garage. The bottom line is Joe Biden was in possession of all kinds of documents from his Senate career. Now, why is no one asking the question that a senator, the only way that you can view classified material is to go into what's called a SCIF, which is a secured area where you can be given a folder and you can go in and read that document to your heart's content. But when you leave, that document stays right there and is refiled. You do not have the ability to take that with you. You're not even allowed to bring a phone into those rooms, so you can't take pictures of the text and have that available. So somehow Joe Biden, from his Senate career, walks away with all of these classified documents, and it just, basically there's no other way to say it except for call it what it is. He stole these documents illegally from the Capitol building. You can't do that. For him to have those documents, they should throw the biggest book on the shelf at him. He should be in severe trouble for that. And even as vice president, that does not give you the ability to have those documents either. It's only the president who may do that because the president has the power without telling anybody, without signing anything. And is this a weakness in our system? I'll concede that might be the case. But the president can just say to himself, okay, this box, I'm declassifying these documents. and he can take them with him. He can take whatever documents he wants with him. And there are documents that maybe the government's going to negotiate to get back. And Trump, being Trump, was stalling them on those processes, and for what reason I don't know, just to be belligerent is probably a good explanation. But the fact that he is indicted for having documents that he is allowed to possess, and Joe Biden is not, because and the fact is he's not, despite the fact that he's not permitted to have any classified material. He was not the president of the United States at the time when he took these documents. And of course, he comes out and blames it on his staff. He throws them under the bus. They delivered these to my house. I didn't authorize it. I didn't do this. Well, how did his staff get a bunch of boxes of classified documents? This is an indictment of this elite brilliant legal minds. And now, because Biden got, completely embarrassed in this report, this guy's finding was that he's not cognitive enough to even be able to conceive what would be happening to him. But yet he's still cognitive enough to have the nuclear football in his possession, to be able to initiate foreign policy, to be able to be the chief executive, the commander in chief, the leader of the free world. Doesn't have the mental capacity to stand trial for blatant violations, but he can be the president of the United States. That is absolutely absurd. And I don't care what your politics are. If you have an argument for me on that point, I would just love to hear it. So you've got this situation, and of course, immediately they dismiss, and this is the main point of today's discussion. They dismiss this whole thing of, Robert Hur. This is clearly just a political dirty laundry here. So now they're completely criticizing this prosecutor for bringing up the fact that Biden's mental capacity does not allow him to be, because he'd be a sympathetic figure. He doesn't think he could get a conviction. So he skates scot-free for just a blatant, severe, serious violation of having those documents. But the explanation now in the liberal media is, this is all politically motivated. He's a Republican operative because he was appointed to that position, the position of U.S. attorney in the Maryland district by Donald Trump. So he's immediately stamped as a Republican. But here's the rub on that. All of these guys, Robert Hur, Rod Rosenstein, who took over when Jeff Sessions stupidly recused his position in his first week in office as Attorney General. Rod Rosenstein, James Comey, a perfect example. All of these Washington swamp monsters, these trained lawyers, these former prosecutors in the Southern District of New York, who's always chasing a partisan agenda. All of these guys are labeled with some party affiliation, but they don't have one. These guys are hybrid. These guys are just like I've been telling you. These are the people behind the scenes who pull the strings and do a lot of the behind the curtain maneuvering of all the policies that we end up having to swallow. And to tab these guys with any political affiliation. James Comey was considered, quote, a Republican. That's absolutely laughable. This guy is a big government. I don't care. There's so many Republicans right now that are in elected positions that are pro-big government. It doesn't matter what their party affiliation is. That's the line between the sane and the insane right now, is that it's not Republican, Democrat. It's John Q. Public, U.S. citizen with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness against these people who think that's a terrible system and they should be in charge and they should make the decisions that affect all of us. So Robert Hur, Obviously a political decision, despite the fact that he was appointed by Merrick Garland to be special counsel. And you've got Jack Smith, who's got a terrible legal record, pursuing Trump like a rabid dog to try and do the ultimate election interference and keep his name off the ballot by keeping him tied up in court. And they would like to see Trump go to jail for the rest of his career. And if you look at the charges in all of these cases, they're all absolutely absurd. And it's such an obvious play to try and take out the most serious contender and the most popular guy right now by far in the polls for the next election. So it's up to you folks, John Q. Public out there listening, and myself and all of the rest of us. We need to let our voices be heard, that we want to adhere. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what your party is. But if we're in America, we want to adhere by our Constitution and our founding principles, and bringing in 10 million people into our country, importing them intentionally to try to upset that apple cart and implode our system socially, culturally, economically from within. This all has to stop. This Washington elite crowd has got to be taken out. They have got to be removed. Drain the swamp. Can't just be a campaign situation or a slogan. It needs to be a reality, because there's a major house cleaning needed in Washington, D.C. And for this country to survive, it better happen soon, or it's going to be too late. That's what I thought you needed to know today. I appreciate listeners every week. Don't forget, Keefer and Kurre. We're going to be talking about some of our favorite programs that are on the air these days, mystery shows, different documentaries. That's going to be a fun subject tomorrow when Tony and I put together Keefer and Kurre. And don't forget, Saturday mornings, ABC 3340 in Birmingham, we're going to have the starting lineup. And you never know who's going to be in the starting lineup week to week. We'd love to have you join us for that, and our great cast of characters. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in to Everything You Need to Know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.